It's been approximately 2 years since one of the most unlikely of games broke onto the scene. Even though it was announced in 2013, the story of how Cuphead came to be into existence is as unlikely as almost any other creative endeavor. A pair of brothers with a passion for 1930s animation came out of nowhere with no experience in this particular genre, no experience as paid illustrators, game designers, took a will and a love for this art form, both the 1930s animation and a run and gun Contra style combat, and tied them together into something completely unique, yet driven by a lineage 80 years in the making. I can pontificate about how great of an offering Cuphead is to the gaming genre, and go through and nitpick and go over all the little pieces they did well. But what I'm most inspired by is their willingness to, as students of their own game, realize what they were capable of if they were willing to actually teach themselves how to get there. These two brothers and their team that followed had really no idea what they were getting themselves into. And for that reason, they're probably more successful than if they had gone in having all the ammunition.
This is what you have to consider when you're embarking on these creative journeys, is recognizing the finiteness of your own knowledge base. And that's okay. Cuphead is really such an exemplary demonstration of what started out as two brothers who had this idea, this nugget of a thing that they wanted to do, and took the time to learn the craft. Like you said, they didn't have backgrounds in game design. They didn't have backgrounds in illustration. What they did is they had passion. They had passion for a 1930s animation art style, and they went in there and they broke it apart, learned everything they could, and self-taught themselves. And that's what I love, is that when you embark on these journeys, you don't have to have all the knowledge right at your fingertips ready to go. You don't have to take tutorials and then apply it. Is you can watch tutorials, you can teach yourself, learn all that you can, and directly apply it to what you're working on. It's about incrementally building, incrementally learning.
No, I mean, when you pave your own way, that is the distinction. Is doing this incrementally is what made it happen. You'll hear me talk about how I absolutely despise how some creatives will only talk about what they want to make, but never do the things to get there. It's even the things that we have to fight ourselves not to be victims of, because we love an idea so much that we just want to tell everyone about it. But you spend all that time talking about it, building it up into this impossible task without actually doing the pieces to do it. With Studio MDHR, they actually went in, worked through. At first, the game actually was going to be something more akin to like a school experience, just going through this elementary school.
Right.
When you go through the multitude of even versions of Cuphead himself, it's amazing to see how the creative process and that journey just took shape just by doing. And doing the work will get you there faster than anything.
And that's the important thing, is that you don't know how much you don't know. And yet it's through doing that you'll start discovering the things that you need to know, the things you need to learn. And that's when you can start equipping yourself. It's by doing that you understand your weaknesses. And then that's when you have a greater idea of how to target those certain gaps. It's just like marketing. You don't really know who to market to until you start getting those target points. And then once you start putting content out there, you're seeing how people are reacting. That's when you can start getting specific and more focused. It's the same thing with education. By doing, you learn what you don't know, and then you learn what you don't know.
Well, and I think that's the key, is knowing the right things to learn. Knowing the right things to learn.
Yeah.
I'm a victim of wanting to know everything about anything I'm touching, and sometimes knowing that is cost prohibitive to actual success, because you get caught up in what you can't do versus what you can do. Neil Gaiman talks about it greatly in his address to a college graduation. He talks about many things in that speech about creativity. One of them being that one of the gifts about being early in your career is you do not know the rules. So when you try to break them, you don't know you're doing anything wrong. You have more of a chance to actually succeed where others will fail because they've already tried and built a ceiling. So they never try to break through it. But here you are stumbling and bumbling and finding what you can do on your way. And through that ignorance, you can find unparalleled success, so long as you're learning those pieces that are imperative to that success.
And that's what's so beautiful about the story of MDHR, is here they had a passion and a love for this old traditional animation style. But they didn't learn how to do that animation like they did back in the 1930s. Is they broke apart and reverse engineered some of how that animation was done. But then they asked an important question: how can we bring this into a new medium? How can we bring this into Unity and then take the modern tools we have, but incorporate some of those traditional techniques. And that's where the magic happens, is learning what you can and seeing how you can apply it in today's lens.
No, I mean, everything from the over exaggerated limbs and things from those old cartoons, when you have people trying to go so much for photorealism and everything else, they made creative choices true to that vision. They kept the things that, while exaggerated, added that character flair. Because you know what? That's how you stand out, is by doing things differently, even if it's drawn from something that was already done before. So they gained the knowledge necessary to make this happen. They learned how to use Unity. They added team members that could actually fill in the blanks to help with the workload. But it's because they were ignorant to the breadth of this thing, they actually kept doing it. I mean, they're actually quoted as saying if they known how hard or expensive it would be to make this, they never would have done it. Come back to pouring concrete. That's sometimes the line in the sand of what we do and don't do, is we do a cost-benefit analysis and we're like, oh man, I if I fail, what am I losing? Versus when you broke it into those pieces, it was like with the losses, the risk and versus reward of it was so minimal, because each time you're like, oh, well, if I mess up, it's this one thing, and then the next one thing. But those small things turn into a bigger puzzle.
Well, and that even goes to our conversation about belief. Is if you already know how difficult the journey is going to be beforehand, are you even brave enough to even set foot? But when you're at the starting point and you've got that belief that's pushing you, that's pulling you forward, that's what drives you to take on the risk, to move forward, to learn things you don't know, and dare to go against the grain of what is considered normal, and risk it all for something new. This is what we see with MDHR, who's willing to take a risk, but like you said, it's incremental risks. They're still working, they're still getting income coming in, but they're slowly chipping away, so that the risk of betting it all on a video game isn't quite as daunting, because again, they're slowly building up to it until they get to a point, which they eventually do, where they do bet it all, but they're comfortable at that point.
Let's be real, with most of us, our entrepreneurial aspects and dreams aren't nearly as large as bringing a video game to life. So when you use what they did comparatively without any experience, and you look in the mirror and say, I'm not good enough, I can't do this, maybe you can't. But is the reason you can't because you're telling yourself you can't, making a self-fulfilling prophecy? Or did you actually honestly look and go, this is bigger than me? And if it is, did you break it in those smaller pieces and say, no, this isn't too big for me to do this, then this, then this, bring them together and have a complete product? I think we get caught up so much in imposter syndrome. To me, that is one of the biggest cancers and plagues within creativity and taking that leap. These brothers found that in each other, they could be accountable and keep feeding into that passion to make it happen. When one of them probably was low at different points, the other one could lift them up and carry that weight, and vice versa. And then they built a team with a true buy-in culture because they were family and friends. This wasn't about nepotism. This was about people who saw how much they cared about it. They became people who could both help with the deliverables of the product, but also in making sure that that accountability was there. Because when it's just you, it's easy to quit. When you had another person, it makes it harder. It's like exercising and having a workout buddy who makes sure that you're there every morning. You add another person, then not doing the work, not continuing through, is a letdown to everyone else.
In understanding that, saying that I don't know enough, it really is just an excuse. And that's a hard one to swallow and a hard one to overcome, but it truly is just an excuse that keeps you from pursuing the things that you want to do. So take the first step. Figure out one thing you want to learn today. Spend some time on it. Spend an hour or two. Start uncovering it. Do some research. Figure out what you can learn now, and then beyond that, directly apply it to the project you want to do. It's one thing to start learning. It's another thing to take that knowledge and start applying it. Because it's when you start applying it, that's when you start seeing things come to life. That's when the passion starts really kicking in. When you just spend all day long just learning, then you're not doing. And it just feels like that goal is getting further and further ahead. But when you couple learning with doing, like I said, that's where the magic happens.
Look, I want to be very clear and as kind as I can when I say this. If you're watching this video, you probably aren't good enough yet. You need to do the work. That is where you find the purpose and the worth. Worthiness isn't something about looking in the mirror and saying, am I good enough? It's found in the grind, in the battles, and doing the work piece by piece. So no, you are not good enough yet, but you can be. I believe that if you're willing to take what others can put before you, use the inspiration of people like the brothers from MDHR, and apply that into something, realizing if they can do it, as unlikely as that is, will you have the success they have? That's irrelevant. It's that you can if you're willing to do it. Are you willing to just say that you're not enough and just always wonder what could have been? Make the effort. Break it into smaller pieces. Find win after win. Come up from the losses. And when you piece it together, have something that you can actually care about.